What's going on, comic fam? It's your boy, the bearded comic bro, and I am joined by comic book creator Chris Condon. Thank you so much for hopping on the show. I'm excited to have you on.
Of course. Thank you for having me on. It's always good to talk.
Yeah, and if you guys are not familiar, Chris is the writer behind the series That Texas Blood, which is fantastic. And we're going to hop into that and just kind of dig into all the goodness that there is about that. But before we do that, I just want to know, I always like to ask when I have a creator on, how did you get into creating comics?
Creating comics is a little different than like reading comics for me. I've been a reader forever. The first comic I wrote outright as a script was only a couple years ago, and
Okay.
it was a idea I had for a Batman story, actually, and that was the first thing that I wrote. And so I was kind of testing the waters with the format and trying to figure that out. And then so I've said previously, it's in the back pages of issue 1 that I originally wrote the script for what would eventually become That Texas Blood as a screenplay.
Right.
And that wasn't working out. So then I was, I'm an avid comic reader. I literally went to the shop just today. So I was like, well, if it's not working that way, I had been thinking about doing something in comics anyway. I was like, why not do that? Because it was a story I really liked. I really loved the character Joe Bob. I wanted to keep writing him. So it sort of presented itself to me in that way.
Nice. So I got to know then, if you went to the store today, what type of comics do you read? What are your go-tos?
I mean, I can just show you. uh, I got
Putting you on the spot.
yeah. Well, there's a couple that I read already, and they're already in my box, my long box. But I read Iron Man 3 and the new Hellboy issue that came out today. Big Mignola fan.
Yep.
Uh, got American Vampire,
Oh, that's
Francavilla cover. Gotta love Francavilla. Scarentud.
Oh, just read that today myself.
Is it good? I haven't read it.
I enjoyed it. So you'll have to let me know.
Yeah, I was really excited about that. I got Green Lantern.
Yes.
So it's a series I really like, and then American Ronin too.
Yes. AWA.
That's what I got.
Stuff. Nice.
Smile today.
Nice.
I forgot to pick up the new Jesse Lonergan.
Oh.
But what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
There's always next Wednesday.
Right. Well, and that's what's so cool. I think when we get to sit down sometimes with creators, because everyone has their different backgrounds of some. I've had some where like I've never read comic books before, and I'm like, okay, and then they're like,
you know,
you are like, this is something you loved, and you're like,
yeah,
it's a passion. That's awesome. And so I assume you started reading comics as a kid then, from the get.
Yeah, I think so. My parents are not comic readers. My dad does. I mean, he barely even understands what it is. I do now. My dad's a little older. He's 82. So, and I'm 29. So if you do the math, he was older when he had me. But he's not into it. My mom wasn't into it. But so I just kind of came into it on my own. I guess the 90s was like a perfect time for that with, Power Rangers and Batman the Animated Series and all that. Superman the Animated Series. So I really probably came to the characters through animation in that way, because I mean, I even was watching like the Fleischer Superman cartoons and things like that. But probably the first comic I actually read and owned was in 1997 when Batman and Robin came out. They at Toys R Us. I almost said Toy Story for some reason. At Toys R Us, they gave away these facsimile editions of old Batman issues. So they gave away one that had Mr. Freeze in it. So I believe it was Mr. Zero at that time.
Yep.
So there was that one they gave away. They gave away a Batgirl one. Obviously, they're trying to hype people up for the movie. So that was the first time I really encountered comics, I think. And then after that, just there's a local comic store here in town which has since closed. And but yeah, that was a place I went to. I got a lot of back issues of Daredevil from the 60s and 70s. That Hush, I remember when that was coming out. But again, very much was into, like what the animated series of Batman was and all that, so I read a lot of Gotham Knights as well with
Mm,
the Brian Boland covers from the
yep.
early 2000s. But yeah, that was really where I started off, and then really didn't expand my horizons until maybe when I was in high school, which would have been around 2005, 2006. That was when I really started reading more and more, looking outside the boundaries of what, like what I knew from
Right.
animation, Batman,
Right.
Daredevil, Superman, all that kind of stuff.
That's that. I mean, that's what's so cool is like, because I think a lot of us have that same kind of mindset. Some of growing up, of remembering watching the animated series, watching X-Men, watching Spider-Man, and the Superman one, like that. It just to then find out, oh, they were based off of books and things like that, and so. Well, how did so? I know you said you were kind of pitching that Texas Blood as a script, and then it wasn't working out, so you kind of went into a comic. How did you get it come from where you had it as a script to then getting it to a comic here with Image?
Yeah. So basically, what the first issue is the first act of what the screenplay. So it was originally, so there was it's a little complicated, but there was, and it's because it's me, so I like overcomplicate things. But there was a script called That Texas Blood,
Okay.
and that was the thing I was trying to get made, and that has a character in it who is a sheriff, and I Whiplash was big at the time, and so they had just come out with that movie, and the way that they'd gotten that movie made was they made a short film based off of a scene in the film. And so that seemed to be a smart move. And I thought, what if we did it a different way than that? And we made a short film that's sort of adjacent to the movie. So
Yeah.
we take a character from the movie and we have them star in the short. And so that's the first issue, is that was supposed to be a short film, but then I ended up liking that so much and liking the character of Joe Bob so much that I ended up writing a completely different features film screenplay called Past Prologue, and which is what the original title of That Texas Blood was. It was originally Past Prologue for a while. We actually have one of the first like promotional things we had was when I think it was when Junkies came out, the hardcover. I think that they had postcards made up. Jacob had postcards made up that said Passes Prologue. So they're out there somewhere, collector's item. But yeah, so that was where that came from. And then just, tried to get it made, trying to get funding, and we had like a promise of money here, and then that would fall apart, and it just was a year of that. Because I wrote the script in 2017. I think it was either late 2016 or 2017. But anyway,
Okay.
yeah, tried to get it made, was not happening after a year. So I had actually contracted Jacob to do conceptual artwork for the film, and that was how he got involved. Was it? So I had been seeing his backups in Killer Be Killed
Okay.
and
Yeah.
really
Yeah. Yeah.
loved his stuff.
Yep.
So I reached out to him on DeviantArt actually, and just sent him a message like, "Hey, love your stuff. I can't really offer too much money, but maybe you'd be interested if you read the script." And he read the script and he liked it. So from there, he did 5 pieces for concept art for me for the film, which are kind of interesting to look at now because it's like, okay, this is where we were, and then this is
Yeah.
where we're now. It's so much more defined. But yeah, so that's really where it came from, was that initial not working out, and then just getting to a point a year later, I was like, I already have Jacob doing artwork for it. Why don't we just do it as a comic book? And
Yeah.
I got to him, asked him that, and he said, yeah, that sounds great. So, and he hadn't had a comic at that point either. So it was advantageous for us both to, get our foot in the door, I guess.
So did you guys then? So you guys did you kind of create the comic first before pitching it to Image, or did you take this to Image and kind of work through them with them, or?
Okay, so yeah, so since I had the screenplay,
Yeah.
I didn't have a comic script at that point. What I did write was the pitch, which was essentially the last third of the short. It was like 8 pages. It was sort of a
Gotcha.
condensed version of the first issue. And so yeah, so that's what I wrote, and then we sent it around to a lot of different companies, not just Image.
Yeah.
And we actually didn't hear back from anybody for a while. heard back from a couple, and there were a couple no's, but with a couple of those no's also came like, but it's good, you know,
Yeah.
which was cool. And that was almost like I was almost happy enough with just that because you know, there's like certain companies that, you know, that you respect and like, oh cool, they like my stuff, like it's really cool.
I'll take it.
Yeah, exactly. But then yeah, so after maybe 3 months or something, we got an email from Eric Stevenson, the publisher at Image, and he said, "If you haven't found a home for this yet, we'd love to have it." And
Wow.
I was taking my little cousins out for Chipotle. And I was like, I think something's happening.
This is pretty cool, guys.
So it was that's pretty much how it
That's
happened.
awesome.
Yeah, and then after that, I adapted it
Okay.
to the comic. But I mean, it's really fun to to sort of adapt your own material into a different medium. You know,
Yeah.
because it makes you think about it. I mean, because when you write a script, you sort of have an idea of what you want to do, but you don't really have it defined. But when you're writing it as a comic, you literally have to name it's going to be this kind
Right.
of shot, and then
Yeah.
this, you know. So it's kind of cool that actually you have to map it out, like force yourself to essentially storyboard it. You know.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So you guys were enjoying a good day of Chipotle, and then you got that email, and it made it even
Yeah.
better. So
It was already a good day.
it was already a good day. You're having Chipotle, so you can't complain. Well, that's funny because I was gonna ask at one point, you know, while we were interviewing of, it seems like issue one is more of a standalone issue that then two, three, like the characters, because you don't even really see some of the characters that are in the most of the rest of the series until issue two. And so I was gonna ask how that kind of came about, but it seems like through everything that how it.
Yeah. Well,
So
I also like that. I like the idea of you can do a one shot and then you can do an arc and then you can do
right.
another one shot. So we have another one. We actually had a one shot. We we were trying to do it for December. It was going to be a Christmas issue, but we're going to actually hold it off till next year. Um, and that introduces another character who will come to play later. But it's kind of cool to, I think, I think some people they expect when they read a comic that it's gonna launch them into like this big event thing, sort of like crossover did, and
Right.
all these, where it's like it leads you into the larger story of the comic. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to just introduce characters to the place, the people, Joe Bob. That was it, essentially, to introduce a flavor of what it's going to be, and then with issue two, start a story arc.
Bits of that same world, kind of just.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same vibe. I mean, it's really cool that so many people are actually reading it and liking it because I really did not know that people were going to like it. I mean, it's a weird series. I feel like 'cause it's pretty slow paced and like, but I made a documentary on my friend's father who's from Texas, who's from Fort Davis, Texas, which is West
Okay.
Texas. So, and so that was how I kind of got introduced to actual Texans and actual Texas was through them. And then the name of that documentary was "It's a Texas Thing." It was just a little short documentary, but there's a line in it that he says. He goes, you lead a slow paced life, and that's like how he thought about it. And he's very much influenced how I've thought about, not even just the character of Joe Bob or Martha or any of them, but yeah, also just like the pace of the series. Um, yeah, I don't know. It works for me. Like I reread the sixth issue just yesterday because we had to approve it for printing, and I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, it's pretty good. It's cool to read it and be like, all right, I think it works. It's just whether it works for other people or not is the question. Like issue 5, I was like, when I wrote it, I was like, oh man, I really like this. And then I sent it to Jacob and I'm like, oh God, he's gonna hate it. And then he's like, oh, I like it. And I'm like, oh, cool. And then I'm like, and then we send it out to the publisher and I'm like, oh God, they're gonna hate it. And it's like I just always come back to I don't know what's wrong with me. I just keep going back to like the negative of like, but it's people seem to like it, and I mean,
Yep.
yeah.
It's been So, okay, I want to get more into where you guys are going with some of this stuff and things like that. But if someone's watching this interview and they've never read that Texas Blood, kind of bring them into like, what's this world that you've created? What is that Texas Blood about? I mean, you've hinted at some of it already, but
Yeah. So it takes place in a fictional West Texas county called Ambrose County, and this is a county where a lot of bad things tend to happen. And we're introduced in issue 1 to Sheriff Joe Bob Coates, who's just turned 70 years old. He's been the sheriff there for a number of years, and he's been on the force for even longer. And he's getting tired, and he's seeing the same things happen over and over again, and it's wearying him.
Yeah.
Let's say.
Yeah.
That's essentially that's kind of the series.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
it really is. I mean, and like what you did, like you said, you started with issue 1 as kind of laying the groundwork of the world it could be in, but then starting with a completely new arc, bringing in new characters and things like that, which I thought was just a really cool idea.
And issue 7 is going to do it again because issue 7 goes back to 1981. So the sheriff, the predecessor sheriff, who's in the dream sequence in issue 1, is now he's going to be the sheriff in 1981.
Okay.
So Bob's a deputy, and we're going to be introduced to characters that exist in that time who may come back again at a later date in the series. But we're introducing all these characters and all these themes, and we're kind of seeing why one of the main in issue 7 we're introduced to one of the main crimes that kind of had a big impact on Joe Bob's worldview.
Gotcha. Well, because I was gonna ask, like, because I mean, issue 1, if you're reading it, you're okay. I want to know some more about some of the things that happened, and then like you kind of go a different route with issue 2. And I was gonna ask, are there elements of issue 1 that you're gonna revisit at points throughout the this series? And
yeah, oh so. Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, even in issue 3 or 4, we meet Ray's the not to spoil it for anybody, but there's a man who does a bad thing in issue 1.
Yeah.
And yeah, we meet his brother in issue like 3 or 4, who owns a bar. And so things are definitely going to come back into play. And there's a specific thing with the predecessor of the dead sheriff that's going to come back.
Gotcha.
For sure. And who knows? Maybe even the casserole dish will make another.
Everyone wants a I bet you get asked every interview, is the casserole dish coming back? Like,
it's so fun that people have latched onto that, because it was sort of a fun thing, because it wasn't in there initially. So it's funny writing stuff, because it's like, even like the short story that's the backup for issues 2 through 6.
Yeah.
Even that, like when I started writing it, it was kind of a different thing, but I had like the basic idea, and then something clicked with the bats. Oh, okay, now I get it. And it's the same thing with that Texas Blood, or the original short Past the Prologue, where I was like writing it, and it was just like wham bam, thank you ma'am, it was done. It was basically, we started with Joe Bob just on the side of the highway talking to Martha. He pulls the guy over, the guy shoots himself in the head. That was it. That was the short.
Yeah.
That was the whole thing. And then I was sitting there and I'm going, that's not really a good short. And then I'm like, well, what if we go through his day leading up to that? And then, and then started thinking about that. And then I'm like, but what's like the connective? And then I was like, what if he's looking for his wife's casserole dish? Okay. And then that was like the thing, and I'm not going to claim that it's brilliant or anything like that, but it's like, it just made it work for me, and it's cool that it's worked for everybody else, but it was just one of those things that, oh, okay, it's just that one thing. It was that one perfect ingredient that was like, all right, now it all works for me, as a writer.
That's so funny that like it wasn't even in there originally, and then you brought it back. And I even said, I was like, I'm not going to ask about casserole dish, because I'm sure people ask them about the casserole dish all the time. But it just is so ingrained into that story that so are we going to see the casserole dish again?
Yeah.
So, so you said you kind of got connected with Jacob through you just messaged him because you were a fan of some of his work. How has that been kind of taking your script, right? Because I want to do some justice to Jacob on the artwork on this book is fantastic as well. Like, and I think
Agreed.
it meshes so well with your writing. So, how is that kind of process for you when you guys are creating this series?
Well, I trust him an awful lot. And just well, first of all, you're absolutely right. He's fantastic and he brings so much to this book, and this book wouldn't exist without him.
Yeah.
Period. It just wouldn't exist. I mean, even if I had decided to message another writer, it would not exist in this way. Who knows if would even have been picked up, you know? It exists because of Jacob getting involved. Um, and yeah, he's fantastic. But yeah, I have a lot of trust in him and in his choices. We have a lot of similarities in terms of our likes and dislikes, and we like the same movies. The comics that we read, we like the same things, books, artwork. We just kind of are simpatico with all that. And so when I write a script, I always put in like, this is how I see it. Change whatever you need to make it work. And he does. So there's times where he'll throw in like some close up or even even like he does this thing where sometimes he doesn't draw the backgrounds. It's just like a white background. That's all him. I didn't write that.
Yeah.
Um, but I love it, and I feel like it adds a flavor to everything. And also, I mean, just the way that he's not even just the way that he's drawing it, but also the way that he colors it, where it's got this like sort of scratchy feel to it,
Mm-hmm.
which I think adds like a sort of rustic flavor to it. I think is really cool. I mean, I really absolutely. I mean, I adore the artwork. I think it's fantastic. But yeah, it's really cool because I feel like he also respects me as the writer, because he does. I mean, it's what he delivers is always like 100% on point of what I wrote, but he adds to it.
Yeah.
Like he makes it better, and like, and he also, the characters, he brings them to life in a way. So it's like the first time I saw Joe Bob, I was like, there he is, that's him. you know Same thing with any of the characters really, and just seeing, for example, that climactic scene in issue 1 come to life,
Yeah.
and the climactic scenes in issues 5 and 6 come to life. Issue 6 is, it's different than I envisioned it for a movie, but it's perfect for how he did it for the comic.
Yeah.
I had made in my mind, I've had this scene in this climactic scene in my mind in issue 6 forever, and it's like just there in my mind. It's perfect, and the way he did it, I was like, oh yeah, that's how you do it. You know, so it's really cool. Yeah, yeah.
That's
I hope I answered your question. I've
yeah. No, no, you absolutely did. So just as we're wrapping up here, the kind of you kind of hinted already at some of the future. You said issue 7 is going to kind of be a standalone issue that you guys are
No, issue 7 is actually going to be an arc
an
story.
arc. Oh, it's part of the story arc that's going on.
No. It's a different story
A
arc.
new, oh, new. It's the start of a new story arc.
It starts a new story arc called Eversol 1981.
Oh, nice. And okay, so that's, I was thinking that was just a one shot. So it's going to be a whole new story arc that you're going with. So you're wrapping up this story to
Issue,
in issue 6 then.
yeah.
Okay. And then do you have, I mean, do you have like this kind of vision for like this whole world of like beyond just this next arc? How far out do you have this kind of played out in your head?
I have the rest of Joe Bob's life mapped out in my head. So the plan is to do 30 issues if we get there.
Okay.
You know, I'd love to do 30 issues. I think that's a great round number because it gives us enough space to fit everything in that I want to fit in, and to really explore the place. Because I feel like, as much as the characters are the characters, I feel like the place is also a character in this, and I feel like that's what you'll see come to play later. Is why all this bad stuff continues to happen in this one county in Texas.
Right, so if people are digging this series, which I am, that's encouraging to hear that, that you have visions for more. So we just so that's exciting. Are you working on kind of anything else, or is your kind of whole world right now that Texas blood?
Yeah, I'm working on a few other things. We also have our the Patreon comic that we created during quarantine.
Yeah.
So that you can find that if anybody wants to check it out. There's 2 issues now. We had to take a break because that's a long story. We started it because we were put on an indefinite hold with
Okay.
Texas blood during quarantine. They pushed us. We didn't know how long. We thought it might be another year. So we came up with a Patreon comic. It's called Brutal Dark. It's a noir adventure story, sort of like an Indiana Jones story, set in 1941 New York. It's short issues, 8 pages each. They're all like one color, so they're pretty cool, pretty different.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that you could find that at patreon.com/Condon Phillips. It's available for $1. If you contribute for $1, you will be charged that $1 and you'll get to read both issues. At this point, we're not charging people because we're not putting out content, because we've been obviously
Back.
doing
Yeah.
Texas Blood. But issue 3 should be coming out shortly in maybe 2 weeks, a week, something like that. So it should be coming out in November. And after that, I think what we might be doing is we might be switching that up to a different format, because it's just basically we're not making enough money to have Jacob commit his time to it, because
Right.
he obviously does the same thing he does on that Texas Blood, which he pencils it, he inks it, he colors it, he letters it. It's a lot of work,
Yeah.
and so essentially it comes down to money for that. So we want to continue the story, but I think we're gonna have to do it in another format, either graphic novel or single issues with Image or whoever.
Right.
So that's something that we're working on together. And then there's some other stuff that I'm working on. I got a whole bunch of ideas that I'm writing currently. I was literally just working on a pitch script for a thing called Revolution's End, which is a Revolutionary War set, sort of paranormal investigator type thing.
Nice.
I really like so I like Hammer horror movies from the 70s and
Okay.
60s
Yeah.
and 50s. So I like those from England, and a lot of those take place in like Victorian era. So it'd be cool to sort of do that for America.
Yeah.
I don't feel like there's enough movies made that take place, or in comics that take place during that time period. I also really like the movie Sleepy Hollow, the Tim Burton movie.
Yeah.
And I again feel like there's not enough like horror stories that take place during that time period. For me, just like as a reader and a watcher, I want to read stuff like that. So I'm working on pitch for that. The first story is just set during a hurricane in a tavern, a haunted tavern. Sort of it's sort of like a Hellboyish sort of series.
Okay. That's awesome.
Yeah, so that's something I'm working on. Then there's other stuff, but I'm just basically cobbling together some ideas. So
Right.
they're gestating, they're cooking.
Nice. Well, Chris, thank you so much for just spending some time talking about comics. If all the links that or all the Patreon, I'll have that in the links in the description below. If people can go click on that, check. Where if anything else you want to share, or just where can people find you, follow along with what you got going on? How can people connect with you?
So I am on Twitter and Instagram. I'm a little more active on Twitter. You can find me on all social media at Christoph Condon. That's it, Christoph Condon. The reason why, my license, they couldn't fit Christopher on it, so it's Christoph, CHRISTOPH, Condon. So at Christoph Condon. So you can find me there. I don't have a Facebook though, so don't look for me there.
you won't find them there. So, man, well,
I
again,
won't be down in that swamp,
yeah, there's only so much social media that you can stay connected with, and then you're like, all right, I gotta stop. So,
Yeah.
well, I'm thankful for you hopping on. I know I'm excited to read more Texas Blood, and I know a bunch of other people are. That's why I wanted to talk with you and just see kind of how things were going. So, thank you so much for just taking some time out of your night, stop writing and hanging out. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for having me. Hope you like issue 6 next month.
I hope to. I hope to. So for all
Fingers.
you guys watching at home, again, all the links, his social media stuff are in the description of this video below the Patreon comic as well. And with that being said, hopefully you all can find some time to curl up, grab a book, and nerd out. Peace.